Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you this evening. Stock markets gain for the fourth day. The sensex and the nifty end at their highest level in 6 months. The nifty now just 150 points away from a record high. The nifty mid-cap index hits a new peak. Market cap hits $3.5 trillion for the first time in 7 months. India's chief economic advisor says there's no move to de-emphasize capex ahead of an election year, adds that the government will address concerns surrounding the 20% TCS on foreign spends. That's an exclusive. RBI Monetary Policy Committee to announce its rate decision tomorrow. Respondents to a CNBC-TV18 poll expects the panel to maintain status quo as inflation is within the RBI comfort zone of 6%. The Cabinet approves an outlay of over 89,000 crore rupees for government-owned BSNL. This is the third revival package for the cash-strapped telco. The outlay includes allotment of 4G and 5G spectrum for BSNL through equity infusion. More than 200 passengers on an Air India flight from Delhi to San Francisco have been stranded in Russia for more than 24 hours. The flight gets diverted after a technical issue. The U.S. State Department says it's likely that American citizens could be on board and is closely monitoring the situation. A ferry flight to rescue stranded passengers has taken off from Mumbai. The government's proposed amendments to the Insurance Act may be taken up during the monsoon session of Parliament. Sources say the government is looking at reducing the initial capital requirement and allowing existing insurers to enter any business subsegment, among others. That's an exclusive. India's top wrestlers Sakshi Malik and Bajrang Punia meet Sports Minister Anurag Thakur days after meeting Home Minister Amit Shah, reiterate their demand for the arrest of Federation Chief Brij Bhushan Singh. Former leader Rakesh Tikait also present at the meeting. Prime Minister Modi's upcoming US visit set to bolster defense ties between both nations. The White House has allowed General Electric to co-produce fighter jet engines with Hindustan Aeronautics in India. Sources say both nations are also likely to seal a reciprocal defense procurement agreement, among other crucial deals. Kiev says the lives of 42,000 people at risk after a major dam in Kherson was destroyed, unleashing flood of water. Authorities declare state of emergency in the annexed parts of Kherson region. Both nations continue to blame each other. A shock merger in the world of golf. The PGA Tour and DP World Tour agree to merge with Saudi Arabia-backed Live Golf after years of acrimony and litigation. Some golfers welcome the deal while others react with anger and surprise. Chief Executive Officer of Global Liquor Major Diageo, Sir Ivan Manuel Menezes, passes away after a brief illness. The India-born British business executive intended to retire at the end of the month, but is admitted to hospital to address multiple conditions, including a stomach ulcer. Well, let's start with the day's trading action, where the market gained for the fourth day. The Nifty and the Sensex ending 0.5% higher, closing at a 6-month high. The Nifty is only 150 points away from hitting new peaks. Mid-caps continue to outperform the blue chips. The index rallied over 1%, hitting new record highs. Financials did underperform relatively. In fact, India's market capitalization has hit $3.5 trillion for the first time since December 1st of last year. Prashant standing by with the details. Prashant, strong move for the markets.
Well, it was a solid session for the markets this Wednesday, and there was no nervousness, there was no looking back, there was no shakeout. It was a steady up move, and starting about 150 or so in the afternoon, the pace picked up a little bit. The Nifty added another 50 points. Banks were perhaps a little more subdued. Small caps continue to race ahead. That index actually is the strongest of the lot out there. The mid caps continue to gain as well. Large caps, we'll tackle that first. FMCG stocks were good gainers. Britannia, Tata Consumer, Nestle are the three names which stood out. Oil marketing companies and BCL as part of the Nifty still. HDFC Life and JSW Steel were the other large caps which participated in a pretty solid way. We come to broader markets, which is where the bulk of the action is, right? Rail infra stocks once again are starting to come back into the mix. RVNL, Railtel, Texmaco Rail, all seeing solid gains. These smaller power companies, look at Suzlon, Torrent Power, Reliance Power, SJVN, they all participated with some gusto. Pharma and healthcare stocks like Strides, which was a big volume-led gainer, Max Healthcare. Then, of course, you had a variety of movers from across sectors. JBM Auto, Nava, Aster DM, Rosari Biotech, Crisil, Dhampur Sugar, NRB Bearing. Some of them, of course, just catching momentum and rallying for a few days on end until till the point the momentum shifts into something else. That's the kind of market we find ourselves in. With the rally today, the Nifty is just 150 points away from the all-time high, which is 18,887. Tomorrow, of course, is the RBI policy in the first half of the day, and I think commentary post the policy from the governor will set the tone in terms of whether we hit those new highs tomorrow or we'll have to wait perhaps one more day. Back to you.
All right, Prashant, many thanks. So on course to touch record highs. That's the market story for today. On to a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. India's Chief Economic Advisor Anantha Nageshwaran says the government is not looking to de-emphasize public spending, which has already been chalked out. In conversation with my colleague Lata Venkatesh, he also addressed concerns regarding the 20% TCS on international credit card spends and said that the tax is under review. Take a look.
There is no thinking at this stage to de-emphasize the public investment expenditure that was penciled in the budget and to shift it, because we do believe that the government is continuing to provide adequately for the consumption needs of the population, especially the low income and poor segments. And we also believe that organic growth will begin to happen. So there is no thinking at the moment that there is a need to shift resources from productive to non-productive transfer-based expenditure. There isn't one. The government has heard many of these concerns being expressed and disappointments, etc. The government is cognizant of them. I think the government will come up with a response. They already are coming up with responses exempting income spending up to a particular level, 7 lakhs, and that may even and also it may also lead to further improvement in the process of linking TCS to TDS, which will then completely take away the concerns.
Well, that is the Chief Economic Advisor. Now, the Reserve Bank will announce its rate decision tomorrow. As per respondents to a poll conducted by CNBC-TV18, the Monetary Policy Committee may continue to maintain status quo. Ritu joins us now with more on what the street is forecasting, a status quo on rates, Ritu, but the big hope is there could be a change in stance. What's the poll saying?
Well, it looks like the Monetary Policy Committee may continue to maintain status quo with inflation moderating well into RBI's comfort zone. The MPC has hiked rates 6 times in this cycle before it paused in April, which is when the governor reiterated it was just a pause, not a pivot several times. That said, all the respondents to CNBC-TV18's poll expect no change in the repo rate, which is now at 6.5%. And the governor's comment on pause, not pivot notwithstanding, all of our respondents believe that we have reached the end of the rate hike cycle. That means rates will not go up any further. In fact, respondents believe that RBI may stay on hold this entire calendar year, with 70% expecting the first rate cut only by the first half of the next fiscal year, with the third expecting a cut in the fourth quarter of this year. The majority of our respondents believe that RBI will continue with its stance of withdrawal of accommodation, since we've seen an increase in liquidity since the announcement of the 2,000 rupee note exchange. Some are, however, expecting a tweak in the wording, but no shift in stance just yet. Now, the MPC is meeting in the backdrop of CPI inflation declining to an 18-month low in April. A majority expect that RBI is now going to revise its inflation projection a shade lower from 5.2% currently. But as far as the GDP is concerned, that forecast at 6.5% is likely to be left unchanged. Now, apart from all of these, the markets are going to focus on RBI's commentary on liquidity, with durable liquidity having increased sharply. Any comments from the RBI governor on indications of an extended pause are also going to be watched very closely. And lastly, the MPC vote on the stance of the policy is expected to be a split one again. So these will be some of the things to watch out for.
Well, that is our RBI Monetary Policy poll. You can catch our coverage of the RBI Monetary Policy from 10 a.m. onwards right here on CNBC-TV18. On to a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. The government's proposed amendments to the Insurance Act may be taken up during the monsoon session of Parliament. Sources have told us that the government is looking at reducing the initial capital requirement and also allowing existing insurers to enter any business subsegment, among other things. Yash joins us now with more details. Yash, what are the key amendments that are being proposed?
Well, Shireen, the most awaited amendments, so to say, as far as the Insurance Act is concerned, these amendments likely to have hit the final lap when it comes to the approval. What we've been given to understand from our sources is that the monsoon session of the Parliament could see the government actually presenting these amendments to the Insurance Act. As far as these amendments are concerned, of course, it's a long list, but the 5 most important amendments which the Department of Finance has proposed include composite insurance license through which life, general, standalone health insurance companies could enter each other's businesses, distribution of other financial products like mutual funds, bank deposits, credit cards. Third one, lowering of minimum capital when it comes to starting insurance business, captive insurance licenses, as well as investment regulations. What we've been given to understand from our sources is that there is a consensus on 3 of these 5 most important amendments, that is on composite insurance license, captive insurance licenses, also on lowering of minimum initial capital. Now, there are 2 things where some tweaks could be brought about by the government. The first one here is as far as investment regulations are concerned. As of the current regulations, insurance companies can have to invest 50% in government securities, both center and state put together, and 15% in equity. What we've been given to understand is that there could be a little tweak here where the power to reduce or increase the equity investments could go to the insurance regulator. But if the insurance regulator wants to change the limits, then it will have to do in consultation with the government, and also it won't be on a case-to-case basis. It will be for the entire industry. Also, as far as captive insurance licenses are concerned, what we've been given to understand is that the power to issue these licenses would rest with the regulator, but the solvency, the minimum solvency that conglomerates who wish to get this license will have to maintain, will have to be decided on a case-to-case basis between the regulator and the government. Most important thing, the other 3 amendments are expected to come as they were proposed in the consultation paper in the monsoon session of the Parliament.
All right, Yash, many thanks for joining us. The other big story this afternoon, the Cabinet has approved an outlay of over 89,000 crore rupees for BSNL, and this includes the allotment of 4G and 5G spectrum for the telecom company via equity infusion. Now, remember, this is the 3rd time that the government has sanctioned a revival package for the cash-strapped entity. Ashmit standing by with the details. Ashmit, what does this now mean for BSNL?
Well, you're right. The Cabinet has approved the revival package. This is the 3rd such revival package, adding up to 89,000 crore rupees. Just for perspective, the previous 3 revival packages, which were in 2019, 2022, and then this latest one, add up to a total of 3.22 lakh crore rupees in terms of value of support that has been provided by the government. In terms of what constitutes this latest revival package, well, there is no cash injection. There's, in fact, allocation of spectrum that has been done. There are 4 key bands in which the spectrum has been provided: 700 megahertz, 2500 megahertz, 3300 megahertz, and 26 gigahertz. Now, all these 4 bands are critical for extending 4G as well as 5G services. Also important to point out that the only other telecom company that has access to the 700 megahertz band is Jio, which had managed to secure that band in the recently concluded spectrum auctions last year. Going forward, the government's expectation is that the BSNL will be able to proceed with providing 4G and 5G services, also providing 4G services in uncovered areas, fixed wireline access for high-speed internet, and also for providing captive networks. As far as what the rationale behind this support is, well, the government's rationale appears to be is that BSNL is turning a curve in terms of operations and in terms of profitability, pointing out that since FY21, the operating profits for BSNL have been positive. For FY21, it was about 1,200 crores. Operating profit for FY22 stood at 950 crore rupees. And for this last fiscal, FY23, it stood at about 1,600 crore rupees. So clearly, the government placing itself firmly behind BSNL.
All right, Ashmit, appreciate you joining us. Now, an Air India flight flying from New Delhi to San Francisco with more than 200 passengers on board had to be diverted to Russia's Magadan after developed a technical snag in one of its engines. Now, Air India has sent a relief aircraft that will take the stranded passengers to San Francisco. Danish Anand is standing by with the details. Danish, it has been a harrowing ordeal for those 200-plus passengers. Take us through where things currently stand.
Well, the Air India ferry flight is airborne as we speak, and the flight took off from the Mumbai International Airport around 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon and is scheduled to land at Magadan in Russia at 6:30 a.m. on 8th of June. So finally the passengers will be able to travel to their final destination, which is San Francisco. But we can clearly say that it took more than 1 day for these passengers to reach their final destination because there was a technical snag in the aircraft which was detected, and that is why the plane was diverted to the Magadan airport in Russia. But all in all, if we see, the entire government authorities are keeping a close watch on the entire issue, and Jyotiraditya Scindia, who is the Civil Aviation Minister, this is what he had to say on this issue.
We have a beat 777-200 that is taking off at 1300 hours, so it must be in the air. Must be in the air just now. It's 6-hour flying, 6.5-hour flying time to Magadan, and it will land there, and at the earliest, it will turn around not turn around. It will board all the passengers and be en route to San Francisco.
Well, that is the Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia on the Air India flight, which finds itself in Russia, a ferry flight now on board to take passengers from Russia to San Francisco. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has said that it is closely monitoring the flight diversion. Addressing the media, the U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel said it's likely that the flight had U.S. citizens on board, and they are aware of Air India's decision to make the emergency landing in Russia.
We are aware of a U.S.-bound flight that had to make an emergency landing in Russia and are continuing to monitor that situation closely. I'm not able to confirm how many U.S. citizens were aboard the flight at this time. It is, of course, likely that there are American citizens on board. As you probably also saw, there's public reporting from Air India that they are sending what my understanding is a replacement aircraft to the destination to have the passengers carry on for their route, but I would defer to the air carrier to speak to anything further on this.
Well, the U.S. State Department spokesperson, they're commenting on the Air India flight that finds itself in Russia. Prime Minister Modi will be in the U.S. for a state visit from the 21st to the 24th of June. However, ahead of the visit, America's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is set to arrive in India on the 13th of June to meet his counterpart Ajit Doval. Both nations are likely to seal a reciprocal defence procurement agreement. Parikshit standing by with more. Parikshit, what could this agreement entail?
Well, the discussions are on between both India and the United States on a security of supply arrangement and reciprocal defense procurement agreement. Now, this would provide India and US and their respective industries with a resilient supply chain of defense components, defense equipment and defense technologies. What we hear from top-level sources in the Indian government is that negotiations could be concluded soon, and these deals could be signed on in the coming months. Whether it happens during the Prime Minister's visit or not, that remains to be seen. However, the agreements will establish a stable supply chain, and both India and US will be able to procure defense equipment from each other's industry under this agreement. Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra was in the United States just recently, just about 24 hours ago, and he held very important meetings with his counterparts in the US in order to review steps to remove regulatory hurdles in industry-to-industry cooperation in the defense sector and also critical and emerging technologies. We must see the kind of visits, the number of visits that have happened at the Foreign Secretary level, at the level of the NSA, at the level of Ashwini Vaishnav, ahead of the Prime Minister's visit to the United States. We could expect some agreements on critical and emerging technologies, including semiconductors. We're given to believe by our sources there will be a set of US semiconductor companies who will be calling on the Prime Minister during the business leg of his visit, and the Indo-US cooperation on critical tech, which includes quantum computing, space, AI, biotech, semiconductors, will all receive a lot of attention during this high-level state visit.
Okay, Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. The NSA, the US NSA, likely to be in India around the 13th of June to take forward those conversations. Time for us to head into a break, but up next, Kyiv says that the lives of 42,000 people at risk after a major dam in Kherson was destroyed, unleashing flood water. That and more when we return. Well, we continue to track the big international story. The Ukraine government has said that the lives of 42,000 people are at risk after a major dam in Kherson was destroyed, unleashing a flood of water. While Ukraine has accused Russia for blowing up the strategically important dam, Russia says Ukraine indulged in deliberate sabotage. We're now joined by Brian Bonner, Senior Editor at Geopolitical Intelligence Services. Mr. Bonner, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Let's start by talking about the immediate implications of what has transpired in Ukraine. Evacuations underway, but what is it likely to mean in terms of the people who find themselves in the heart of this incident?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm coming from Kyiv. What we have here is hopefully not much loss of life, but we have a lot of loss of property. We have an ecocide going on. We have, toxic chemicals, oil, everything being washed away, big flooded area, people unable to evacuate from the Russian side, reports, and people on the Ukrainian side of the divide are being shot at by Russian forces. So we have a mess there, and it's going to, eventually the waters will recede, but they're peaking today, and I don't think we're going to know the full extent of the damage until after that happens.
Yes, we will have to wait to see. But Mr. Bonner, many experts suggest that this could be a turning point in the current strategic approach as far as the conflict is concerned between Russia and Ukraine. Now, as far as Russia is concerned, this means that there could be significant impact on Russia's ability to continue to hold on to Crimea and what this means for Crimea. On the Ukrainian side, the summer offensive that was being planned and was underway, what will that mean now for the counteroffensive that was being planned?
Well, I think the counteroffensive will go through, and I have to step back. There's a lot of false equivalency going on here. First of all, Russia invaded the sovereign territory of Ukraine. They control 20%. Part of that 20% includes the hydropower dam that was blown up in an explosion. It was done by Russia. The evidence will show it's done by Russia. There was no artillery. We have it coming in at this explosion from the inside, which Russia controls. Russia mined. The president of Ukraine warned all the way back in October that this was going to happen. It happened. These are Ukrainians who are suffering. This is Ukrainian land that is suffering. And the next big thing that the world needs to watch for, which Ukraine has warned, is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which was stolen by Russia along with the rest of the 20% of Ukraine. And that's where the next big catastrophe, ecological and human catastrophe, could happen. So we have that. That said, obviously it's going to divert. There's not going to be any crossing at that point. But if you look along the lines, the goal remains the same, and hopefully everybody, including India, will get behind this goal of restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And there's a lot of still other places in which the offensive will take place. Obviously, I'm not privy to that, but the end goal remains the same, which is this war could be over today, tomorrow, if Russia would just leave Ukraine alone.
Well, you're right in pointing out that the goal remains the same as far as Ukraine is concerned, which is to get Russia to leave its sovereign territory. But what do you expect now in terms of strategy from Russia, given where we find ourselves?
Well, I expect more of these destructive tactics. All Ukrainians do. Russians have shown they have no regard for international law, for human life, for Ukrainians. They've destroyed city after city, killed tens of thousands of people. We're not going to know until Ukraine gets back into those territories exactly the extent. Russia's trying to wipe Ukraine off the map. Russia doesn't believe Ukraine exists as a separate country. This is really, really genocide of the 21st century. But, to your question, this, as I understand from military experts, this was not going to be a likely crossing point for the counteroffensive, because the Dnipro River, which is our, Ukraine's big river, I'm an American, so I compare it to America's Mississippi, was very wide. So there's going to have to be other areas, and unfortunately, there's plenty of other avenues to attack along what is a 1,000-kilometer front line.
Brian Bonner, appreciate you joining us to take us through where things currently stand in Ukraine and, more importantly, what the road ahead possibly could look like. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. We will take a break here on Business 360. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a minute with the news.